time, I'll call the Templeton Board of Selectmen to meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a full agenda, so we will jump right in. Our first item is the Town Administrator Report. Mr. Markle?
Yes. First item is the operating budget for the town. You should have copies. Here's just a rundown of where we are with the operating budget for fiscal 2016. This is a so-called omnibus budget. I've tried to put all the spending of the town into one document. That's both for my own convenience, I guess, but I think it also will be helpful when we share this with the citizens so that they can know exactly what we're spending, as opposed to having to look in the budget and then look at articles on the warrant. I found that very confusing, so I've tried to minimize the number of financial articles on the warrant and to put the entire spending plan in this document. I'm calling it an omnibus budget. Secondly, I think while the articles in the paper have been basically accurate, I think one of the headlines might have led people to conclude that we have a deficit. We do not have a deficit. There's no deficit in fiscal 16. We have a balanced budget. The question is, how much revenue do we have and will we have to add back some of the services that were lost last year? How much can we restore versus, are we underwater? We're not underwater. I also have more to say about that a little later. Our new town accountant, Kelly, and I have spent a good deal of time trying to review every single revenue line and revenue category and every single spending line item. The one where we've had problems is the so-called miscellaneous recurring line item. And that's a catch-all for a whole variety of monies that we get into the town. Reimbursements from the utilities, money from the town of Phillipston for providing dispatch services, and so forth. And so that's where we've had some trouble, frankly, and I'm happy to say it has worked out. I mean, she has done some great work, and I'll pass out to you what I was given just today, and this has also been discussed with the Department of Revenue. I was on the phone to Springfield today and to the Boston DOR to try and talk to them about some of these items. And we found today, actually she found, I guess it was yesterday, two other issues. We get $54,000 from the town of Phillipston for providing them with dispatch services. What was reported to the Department of Revenue by the prior accountant was $27,000. So we found, to our favor, an additional $27,000 that was oddly recorded and not on our recap sheet. The other thing that was found is even more surprising. She found that the monies that are contributed to the town by the Light and Water Department, it was $160,000 it was the retirement reimbursement, or was it, the retirement reimbursement. That was also unreported in this category. And so, we now have, and I've just passed out to you, what we know goes into that account. And you'll see that the revenue total has gone up to some extent. We also put the reimbursement in there for plowing snow for the Narragansett School District and so forth. So this is what goes into that so-called miscellaneous recurring account. If you look at the budget, you'll find that miscellaneous non-recurring had a lot of funds in it in prior years. Well, DOR said that that's not the proper way to report it, and so everything was moved over to miscellaneous recurring. And anyway, this is a bit of a confusing situation, but now this last item in the budget process has been clarified, and I'm fully confident that the numbers that we have are solid for the coming year. Let me go through the other things that we have. Certain items that were voted on the warrant have been added into the budget. I mentioned that before. We used to pay for the Vadar software system with a warrant article. That's now in the budget. The assessor's mapping was paid on the warrant. That's now in the budget as well. The retirement assessment from Worcester County Retirement is paid as a warrant article. By the way, it's also in the budget. So in the past, it's been appropriated twice. So you'll see in the budget, or you see in the warrant, and I'm going to show you later on, that that's eliminated in the warrant. I've talked to town council about that, back and forth. I talked to the Department of Revenue today about that. And I looked at some other communities, because I have no recollection of ever having voted monies for the regional retirement system in the operating budget. So we took it out. We have a full accounting in the operating budget of Worcester County retirement costs, $612,000. Actually, it's $624,000, but we're going to take a discount that they offer of $12,000 if you make one payment rather than two. So anyway, also school assessments. That ought to be reflected. That's a lot of spending. It ought to be reflected in the budget of the town. So that's in the budget. The warrant articles have been removed. And lastly, debt service. We have a debt service article in the budget and on the warrant. It's been taken off the warrant because we vote debt service very clearly in the operating budget. So that, again, that's part of trying to consolidate everything into this document so we know, looking at one document, what the town is spending in all categories. Some of the items have been rearranged. The town voted for 2 fire EMS positions several years ago, and that's been carried as a line item. We've incorporated that with the fire department budget, and we have put into the EMS category that budget that was $160,000, then $180,000, now $244,000. That comes from the receipts reserved for appropriation ambulance fund. And so I talked with the chief about that. We think that that makes sense. Also, the fuel accounts, we've talked about that. I've talked about it with the advisory board. We had a fuel account in the highway department for diesel and one for gas. That brought some flexibility problems, and also sometimes we buy diesel and it would be put against the gas account and vice versa. So there's one account for fuel. And almost all the add-back items that were approved by the Board of Selectmen are retained. The raises for town employees are retained in the budget. The master plan funding for the planning department is retained. The changes that we made for the COA staff are retained. The town hall maintenance person for 5 hours is in the budget. That person is the same person who does the maintenance work at the Council on Aging. We're funding that person for 5 hours to come over here and actually provide some maintenance. the staff support for the cemetery superintendent, just several hours a week, but it'll be provided through the staff of the COA so that it would assist Alan in doing the paperwork basically for burials. The town accountant is funded at 40 hours, the health agent at 35 hours. The new staff for the assessors and the clerk are funded for the full year. The certification monies for the accountant, the treasurer collector, and the assistant treasurer collector, and the clerk, so that they can go to school, maintain, or get certification, is in the budget. The Conservation Commission staffing money is in the budget. The tree warden money is in the budget. The recreation funding that you approved is in the budget. The MS4 funding, as we talked last time, the EPA is coming out with a new permit, MS4 permit. This is the stormwater program, and they're going to force the town, according to the highway superintendent, to spend some money making further improvements in the way stormwater is handled. Estimate for that's about $20,000. Federal mandate, unfunded. The veterans' benefits, as you know, what we pay for veterans' benefits has been steadily rising. Obviously, veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan in larger numbers, and some in need of assistance. The fire EMS FTE is in the budget. The two areas where we were not able, given the more limited funds, able to provide funding that I can't see doing with the funds that we have are a new police officer and an additional employee for the highway department. If you look in the budget, that which is funded, and with the benefit of the full reporting of the reimbursements that we are getting. By the way, we're doing the billing now also. We're going to do we are doing quarterly billings to the utilities departments for health insurance and retirement and so forth. That leaves the bottom line there, as you can see, of $64,000 unallocated. I think that's a cushion that we can have into the next fiscal year. If you take a look at the town administrator's salary account, there's about $30,000 there that will not be used, given that, I'm interim and temporary. So, 64 plus 30, and we still have the emergency fund of the advisory board, which would be another 50. So things happened during the year. We saw that the playground equipment grant was snatched away by the state, and so we have to cover it ourselves. So those kinds of things happened during the year. We clearly need a cushion going into the year, so we'll have monies available to transfer in case of need. So that's an update on the budget. All of these numbers have been reviewed. As I said, we know that the pay periods in the current year were 52 weeks and 2 days, if you look at the calendar. I was under the impression that for a while there that it was 52 weeks and 3 days next year, forgetting that next year is leap year. So we have factored in leap year in this budget and reconfigured all the salary accounts to reflect that town employees are going to be paid for 52 weeks and 4 days. So I did that, and I had Kelly look it over, and we had a few places where we had to make some corrections, but these numbers, I think, are good hard numbers at this point for the payrolls for the year. I have some information on health insurance, which I'll share with you in the executive session. I also have passed out, and most of the work the past week has been with budget and warrant. The warrant has been updated. I've added the financial transfers, quite a few. There are a number of areas in this budget where we need transfers, but you'll see that the monies that we have available to transfer balance with the need of various departments. I mean, I've talked to you before about some of that need. We under-budgeted, or the budget this year was underfunded for, let's say, veterans' benefits. They've been rising rapidly, and so we have to cover that. Some need for group insurance. Medicare was not funded, and so we have to cover that. Some additional funds for retirement. Unemployment compensation, obviously lists past summer when we had 16 employees laid off. Many sought workers' unemployment compensation, so that budget went up. These are the kinds of things that happen during the year. Police chief retired, and there was a very substantial end-of-career benefit that we had to pay. It was unfunded, and we had to come out of the police chief's salary account, and so we're covering that with transfers now so that the current chief can be paid through the end of the year. Those are the major items where we are transferring money in, and as you can see, there's a list of items where we're transferring money out. Otherwise, what I've added to this warrant, and again, I think it's good to have it in the same document. You've got the warrant article. There's a summary after each article, just basically trying to give an explanation to town meeting attendees to what the article is about. And the main motion, obviously it could get modified, but the main motion there, and then also I put underneath whether it requires a majority or a two-thirds vote on those items. I also added a consent article, Article number 1. This is being done a lot. I mean, there are some routine boilerplate things that we do at town meeting that don't need to be voted separately. So I put a consent article. If people don't like that, they can tease them out. There's just 3 combined into one article. People can say, I object, I'd like to treat item 3 separately, for example. So you can always have that opportunity, but looking at the past, these items pass unanimously, so they may as well be bunched together because, for example, we're going to vote to accept reports of town committees and reports of the officers printed in the town report, those kinds of things are in the consent calendar. You have the financial transfers. Also, there's an article here that permits the selectmen and town administrator to transfer funds from the line item for increases in salaries and wages when contracts are settled. In other words, the choice is we have identified funds that we have available for the first raises for town employees since 2011. How do we handle that? We can put it in the budget, each line item, but I don't know for sure until we settle the contracts, for example, what that number is going to be. So I could put a new salary or new wage scale in for an employee, but until I have the contract settled, I don't know what that's going to be. So we put one line item, and then there's an article here, and this is also done elsewhere and certainly approved by town council, allowing the transfer of funds out of this account when contracts with when collective bargaining agreements are settled with town employees or when there's any non-bargaining raises. Again, I told you we consolidated some articles. We used to have 2 articles on the ambulance service. One article would authorize the moving forward of funds in the receipts reserved for appropriation account from one year to the next. And the other article would authorize returning any unexpended funds in the ambulance account back to the receipts reserved for appropriation account. So I basically combined the language in one article there. I think that's from the last time you saw that. I think, oh, yes, we added the transfer for the construction of the senior center. As you know, the town accountant, in digging into the remote past, found $48,000 that had been put into another account. And so that money was intended to support the senior center construction. And so we're going to transfer those funds with one of those articles. Oh, one more item here. We opened bids for the vault for the town clerk yesterday. And there's some unresolved issues. We contacted the low bidder, and right now, the low bidder is going through some rethinking, and it might not work out. Even if we are able to sign an agreement with the low bidder, the total cost of the vault will be $128,000. The Community Preservation Committee voted $120,000 at the special town meeting in the fall, I think. So we're going to need more money there to get the vault done. We've been out to bid twice, and some other changes were made to try and bring the price down. That seems to be the rock bottom price. The Community Preservation Committee has not acted on the increase, but they're going to as soon as they know the number. We will be able to give them the number when we know what will happen with the low bidder, or will we have to go to the next highest bidder if the low bidder wants to back out, basically. So we don't have I put $8,000 there, but that's likely to change. So if you vote the warrant, to sign the warrant tonight, I would ask that you would authorize me to make that change and to make any other changes to the motions that might be recommended by town council. Town council has reviewed the warrant articles, but I just completed the motions recently, and they haven't reviewed the motions. But other than that, this would seem to be, unless you have some amendments or recommendations, this would seem to be the warrant that is ready to be signed.
Does anyone on the board have any, I know we have this as a separate item, but,
Or, I mean, you haven't decided to take anything out of here either.
right,
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Does anyone have any questions for the town administrator at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, Diane?
To go backwards for the add backs,
Okay?
I looked through the minutes to see what was voted.
Yep.
The building inspector. There was an addition of $12,435, is that reflected in here?
Yes.
Okay, there was an addition to the scholarship to make it $4,000, that's not in
The
here?
building inspector will be at 20, the health agent. You voted for 40, we couldn't get there, we got the 35.
Okay, so the number that's here, in here is accurate?
For,
Is what's reflected in what we,
yes.
because
Yes.
it's not in your list here, not for or not?
No, it
It's,
is there, yes,
okay.
absolutely.
Beaver control, we voted for
That's in there as
$1,000.
well, it's $1,000.
I don't see that. What page is that on? Sorry, that's one thing, and
Yeah.
then we voted 150 for the historical commission. It says
That's in there.
250?
I didn't put it on my list, but it's there.
Okay, and then we also voted
Yeah, that
for 4,000 for scholarship, and that's at 2,500.
is at 2,500. I mean, I can change
Okay, so
that if
that's
you.
not
that's-
part of the add back then? You didn't?
It is, it was.
Can we fix that? Or no? Is that going to be
I
part
can
of the
do it if
no,
that's.
we cannot
if,
do that?
Let me just first of all verify, to your satisfaction, that we have the $1,000
Yeah, I couldn't.
there for pest control.
Or Beaver?
No, it was.
Yeah,
for
here it is, it's there.
Pest,
It's
that
on-
was, they were two, did we? No.
No, beavers are pests.
That's pest?
Oh, that's included in
They're pests.
that, okay.
Okay, fine.
I mean, that's, and
Beaver and pest are two separate things.
I thought they were separate.
Where are the
So,
Beaver and pest are two separate line items.
well, wait a minute.
so,
Then I
yeah, and I think
then I
we
don't have an
opted
understanding
not
of
to
where
do
the
the
beaver money
pest,
is supposed
but
to
we
go.
opted to do beaver money.
Yeah, I think that's
So
what.
it's in the wrong place in
Where,
here.
where does the beaver money go?
The beaver money goes in.
Board of Health?
No, it's a separate line item, beaver.
I don't even see it at all.
Because we decided not to do the mosquito control
Right.
because most of the
Right.
Triple E comes from red oak swamps, which we
Right.
don't have enough money to spray anyway, so it's not worth spending the 1,000.
Beaver trap.
We'd have to look at
I
it.
think we'll have to add a line item for that.
Yeah.
We used to have one,
But who was it under?
I
Was it
didn't
highway
find any
select?
line item that said beaver.
Yeah, it was under Selectmen.
Yeah, I think it was the Selectmen.
I didn't find any line item that said beaver control, so I put it under pest.
Yeah.
But I can, we can take the pest money out and put $1,000 in for beaver control.
yeah, 'cause you have to pay the beaver tax.
Yes.
They get paid by the beaver.
They put in the deceivers, don't they? The beaver deceivers?
Yeah,
Okay.
to trap them.
And then the scholarship account.
Oh, and the scholarship.
Anyone, you want $1,500 more in the scholarship?
Yeah.
And you noticed, you asked about the Historic Commission, that money's
I
there.
just wanted to make sure, like, that the
Yep.
250 is, I didn't know if it was going from 250 to another amount, or, I honestly don't remember, so I'm
They
asking you if
wanted
that's
they had a
already in there.
$100 budget.
They wanted
Yeah.
250.
They wanted $250. That's,
And that's what we get, okay.
their budget's $250.
Okay. Yep,
Yes.
we're good.
That's, sure.
Worcester County Retirement, you mentioned a number of 624,000 for Worcester County Retirement in your budget.
Yes,
Does that include water, sewer?
yes.
It does.
We went back and forth about how to handle that in the budget process. Kelly had a conversation with the Springfield office of the DOR, and they want the entire amount reflected in the budget. So that's what we're doing.
Actually, that's kind of deceiving to the taxpayers because that is paid by the ratepayers of your sewer, water,
Correct.
and your light.
Correct.
So that is actually misconceiving to the taxpayers
No.
for the budget.
No.
Can you
What,
explain that out there?
Yes.
That you better figure it out.
this doesn't show it, but in the electronic copy, there are little red triangles in some of the cells. And if you hover the cursor over the red triangle, a little pop-out comes out and explains things. So that explanation will be found under, in other words, the breakout of those costs.
At the town meeting, they're gonna have those breakouts.
Yes.
So people can use them.
Well, I have an electronic copy, so,
Well, some people don't have
yeah.
computers.
It will be, I'm sure it will be explained. We had this question at our last meeting about whether or not it would be explained that
Same with
that
health
is-
insurance.
Right.
Same
health
applies for
insurance.
health insurance as well.
Yeah. So, but as,
Then they're paying twice, that by, look, it's on your budget and it's on our budget. Well, like.
Well, we don't vote on your budget, though. We don't vote on your budget,
No,
so it
the
doesn't
light,
matter.
Water and the sewer budget reflects those charges, and if the ratepayers are paying twice for it, then because if they're gonna.
It looks
if they're going
duplicated
to
with
vote
what she's
on your
saying is
budget,
right.
It is in both.
Right. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we
No,
have,
they're voting both articles. They're voting both articles at the town meeting, so it's gonna be a line item on both, I'm sorry.
well, no, we don't
We don't
vote,
vote
we
on
don't
your
vote the light and
budgets.
water budget, or there's,
Correct.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I do
So,
apologize.
but unfortunately or fortunately, we march to the tune of the DOR as they provide our state aid, which is our money that we pay to the state, but that's a separate topic. But, so if the DOR wants it a certain way, we have to do it on paper the way they want and then explain it at town meeting to the voters.
Could you provide me with that article as far as breakdown of what the DOR is requesting? Of that breakdown?
We have that information, and as I said, it'll be reflected on the electronic budget, but you were saying that that's not, you can't,
Well, a lot of people don't have
Yeah, I know.
computers to access that information when they're going
Right.
to vote on something as important as the taxes. It's gone up $7.20 in the last 9 years per thousand.
Right.
So for me, who has just a small little stamp of a quarter of an acre, my taxes in the last 9 years have gone up $1,080 a year. That's a lot when you have 4 children.
Right.
And
Everything
we
over,
have to quote them.
right, everything by law over 2.5% increase was approved by voters, so the selectmen don't have control over that. All the overrides that have been voted were voted by the towns, and this is a democracy, so if that's what people vote, we have to comply with what they want. Which, if you check, obviously, everything by law that's over 2.5% was voted by town voters. So that's not the select board that's increased those taxes, that's the voters that have increased above 2.5%. But we will be sure to, be sure to have a printout and convey the information that those funds are, that we have to reflect them on the budget, but then we also reflect them as revenue, and they are reflected in the town's revenue recaps. So that information will also be available, and under the revenue side, you'll be able to see the light and water, sewer, contributions both to the retirement and to the health insurance. What this actually, I believe, was one of the factors that caused our previous $550,000 or $600,000 or whatever it ended up being issue, was that we were not showing, we were like, there was a conception that, oh, well, it's in revenues and it's in expenses, so they cancel each other out, so we won't show them. And then that led us into one of those got forgotten, it was counted as revenue and not as an expense. So now everything is shown on our recaps and on the budget to provide full transparency. But again, with the explanation to the ratepayers and taxpayers that those funds are being reimbursed to the town on the revenue side of the recap sheet.
Okay, the 505 mistake that was a few years ago.
Right.
My understanding, and I'm not saying, this is just what I've heard on the outside, is that the 505,000 was actually something that was voted on from the townspeople years ago in regards to a bond issue for the sewer that the town was supposed to be paying out of ratepayers.
That was not the situation at all. It was a very simple, it's simple, it was 500,000, but the error was simple in that it was revenue and expenses. Something was counted as revenue that was not counted as an expense. So we thought we had more money than what we did, which is why then the budget did not reflect, but unfortunately we didn't discover that mistake until halfway through we discovered it a little earlier, but we didn't correct that until about 9 months into the fiscal year. So that was the source of that problem. But that, trying to avoid problems like that, because it's much easier to explain it. And I'm sure, as I'm sure you're aware, that the Light and Water Commissioners will be at the town meeting to explain to the residents, as will the town administrator, be there to explain to the residents that, yes, it shows up on this budget, however, it is compensated, or those funds are shown as revenue to the town, so they balance each other out. And I don't recall us ever having an issue with someone challenging our Worcester County retirement or health insurance expenses, which is the only reason that it would ever be a problem. But I'm sure if that happens, that there will be numerous people, including myself. I promise you I'll be there, unless I get hit by a bus or something. I will be there to explain that as well personally to the people, that they understand that you're not paying this twice, right, that it's only a one-time charge. Yes,
And if I
ma'am.
can just act on you too also, the tax rate and the fluctuation of why it's jumped so much in 10 years is you gotta realize up until fiscal 13, the town was using all their free cash, all their stabilization to balance the budget to keep your tax rate low. And because of that, we now have no free cash and no stabilization to speak of. And that's why your tax rate now is going up over the years. We used all our free cash. You shouldn't have done that. And now your tax rate is being reflected because we can't do it anymore because we don't have any money left.
Well, it's not-
Yeah, we've announced earlier
won't be
that there's no
certified
free
either.
cash, there's no free cash being used in this
Correct.
budget, and no stabilization money being used.
Right.
So this
So
is
this-
an honest budget.
Yeah.
It's an honest
Yeah.
budget.
The town will not do past practice and take that
Yeah,
free cash.
there was one particular year where it was more than $800,000. $886,000 in one-time revenue were used to pay people salaries that are recurrent. So then when you have a year where you don't have $886,000, it's time to cut 880, right. But as Mr. Markle said, this is an honest budget. We're not using any free cash, any stabilization. We can't use free cash because they won't certify it. So that keeps us, that keeps us honest. But we're working on that. And I would also like to, just because I can anticipate, not from you at all, but because I can anticipate issues with town raises, I just want to point out that I firmly believe that one of the problems, we had how many treasurers in 2 years? 5? 4, 5, 6 in 3 years, that is why we now need this. They won't, the DOR won't even take our books until they're audited, because we pay half of what Phillipston does, and per hour, not overall, but per hour, to our accountant, our treasurer. So I'm not comparing us to, like, Newton, I'm comparing us to Phillipston, not even Gardner, because that's, they obviously have a much bigger budget, but Phillipston, Peter Sam, we still pay less, I think like $6 an hour less than what Peter Sam pays for, per hour to our accountant and treasurer. So that's why we have these increases, is to try to, balance things slowly so that we can at least keep qualified, candidates.
Peter Sam's, treasurer, I'm sorry.
They have part-time.
Is there, yeah.
Right, it's part-time, right.
Are they certified CPAs?
I'm not sure. We put it out to bid, and no certified CPAs, or even certified treasurers even applied for the job, and we went out twice for bid. So still what we're paying is far under what, obviously is required. But, so moving on, did that resolve your questions?
I have one more question in regards to unemployment.
Yep, we'll get to that in 1 second. That resolves, do any of the other select, board members have any questions, for the town administrator?
I just had a question on MS4, the stormwater.
Oh, yes.
I think we should probably, I know we don't have to go out to bid for an engineering firm, but gather requests for proposals, because I think there's been a lot of transition with the engineering firm we had to do the original MS4 data. And I think it's just good practice at this point
Okay.
to go out and do that.
As you know, the last discussion we had was when the money is going to, Bud estimated that we're going to have to, it's going to cost the town about $20,000 when the MS4 permit comes out, and there's a short timeline for compliance. And he said that some compliance measures might be taken in the current year, but it would be prudent to put aside $20,000 for next year. So that's what we've done. There's an interesting contrast in the way the federal government behaves now and the way they used to behave. I remember when they built the wastewater treatment plant in the lower Connecticut Valley. It serves 6 communities, and the federal government said, you must do it, you must have secondary treatment of wastewater, build the plant, it's going to cost $55 million. Oh, and by the way, here's 45. The state said, yes, it's going to cost 55. The federal government gave you 45, and oh, by the way, here's 5. And so the 6 communities of the lower Connecticut Valley had to pay $5 million for that plant. The new game now is the EPA says, and this was from an EPA mandate. EPA now says, here are the rules, here are the sanctions, you pay for it. And so that's what we're having to do here, basically pay from property tax money for federal mandates for stormwater, which I'm sure will benefit the town. It's a good idea. The question is who pays. So we have to, Bud's recommended that we put the money in the budget.
And I know it was in the Gardner News that Mayor Hawk had signed on some type of letter to protest,
Yeah.
or, and I just didn't know if there was anything for cities,
Oh, right.
towns to do
Towns, yeah.
that, because I think that would be something to behoove us. When this first came about, and it was a while ago, we put hundreds of thousands of dollars into stormwater management to develop a plan, to tag all the outfalls and do all that work. And I just, at one point, I just said, it would be easier if we had a bylaw that made all the water in Templeton flow uphill. And when it gets there, then we'll talk. But no one took me up on it. So it's a lot of unfunded mandates are coming our way, especially around water.
Yeah, they learned how to do that from the Department of Education, actually. I think that's who invented the unfunded mandate, and then the Environmental Protection Agency has caught on to how to do that. But so, Ed, Amanda, your question about the unemployment insurance.
Just a question in regards to that. I know the highway department was laid off for 2 months, I believe, last.
6, was it 6 weeks?
7 weeks.
7
7
weeks,
weeks.
Okay,
yes.
7 weeks in FY '14.
Yes.
Okay, so after they're done collecting unemployment, then we need to start paying it, obviously, for the amount of time that they collected and the amount of people, right? On your full budget of payroll, not just the amount of those people. That's.
Correct, right.
But who else has been on unemployment that would bring this up 100%? Besides just, because we would have only paid for 2 months of, or 7 weeks of those employees being off the payroll.
But I will say, it wasn't just highway, it was everybody. Everybody that wasn't light and water and sewer. Everyone else was gone.
The building
Right, but that was
inspector.
Building inspector,
That's only
Health
for 2
agent.
months' time, correct?
right, but it's the entire workforce laid off for
Right, but you're
2
only-
months.
Right, and you're only paying back for those 2 months that they're off. When that unemployment ends, it's for those 2 months. If we had an employee that went out and they were collecting for 18 months, which is usually your max of collection.
Right.
If it was approved to the unemployment. Once that person ends that collection, your rate goes from, our rate was 0.1%, and it went up to 1.0% of your total payroll, not just what that person earned. And you have to pay that back for 18 months.
Right.
As long as, for the amount of people. But that wouldn't bring you up 100% this year, it's just those particular people for 7 weeks.
Is that the figure that we received from unemployment?
Are we talking about the transfer?
No, I'm just.
Or are we talking about the new budget?
Yeah, I'm talking actually about FY '15.
FY 16.
Or the 100% that has already been up and rolling 3/4 through the year.
That's not a judgment there. That's what we were informed has to be.
So you're actually not sure who you're actually paying for, because
Funded.
after 2 months, your rate would have went back down.
Right,
for those
yes.
7 weeks of those days.
I mean, I know we have a list. I don't have it handy as to who is collecting or who has been collecting, but the bulk of those collections were for some people who were laid off for 7 weeks, and there are some others who've been laid off longer. I don't think we need to mention names right now, but I do know others who have been longer term on unemployment.
Yes, sir.
So that's what this money was.
Unemployment doesn't work that way. When someone collects and you end up getting hit, unemployment is charged everybody, every employer,
Right.
including the town, so much of their budget. That's to pay for unemployment
Right.
for everybody in the state.
Well, that's
When you
what-
end up having an increase because you had some layoffs, the percentage goes up, and that's what you pay in. It's not to take and pay back what somebody has taken out. It's to pay into the system.
It's
to
insurance,
pay in-
right,
Cover
it's
it.
insurance,
For
yeah.
But it's over your total
Right.
payroll of the town, not for what those employees' payroll amount was.
Right, for the total, right.
Yeah, so you're talking everybody in town, no matter the other people who got laid off, you have to pay the exact amount. Like, right now, they're back to work, you're paying on that payroll amount.
Right, right,
It's not what they missed.
right, exactly, right.
Yeah, but this is not a value judgment on our part. This is what we're required to pay.
Right,
We can't
exactly.
tell
I
them,
didn't
right.
pick a number there.
Up for
I-
debate.
No, but
Yeah.
I know if you've had people laid off prior to that, it should have been placed into the budget for FY '15, so you can cover the cost. But you're saying there's an article out there to cover that cost by a vote? Is that what?
We are covering the cost, the additional costs in the current fiscal year on the warrant through the financial transfer, Article number 2.
To transfer money from
Right.
what account to
Well, there's a whole series of them there.
series? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And when will that be available to the public?
As soon as the selectmen sign it, this warrant will be posted on the town website and any other sites that we can find, or any other venues that we can find, to get it to the public so that they can review it. The same with the budget.
Yep, we haven't voted the town warrant yet, or the budget, so to have copies out there that are not finalized has caused problems in the past, so I think we're trying to, I mean, full transparency, obviously, everything is on camera, you can watch it on YouTube, but having several copies of the budget on the town's website or here or there has caused problems in the past with confusion, where people come to town meeting with their copy that they've studied, and it's, it's disheartening to hear that was the budget for like 6 hours until we held our next meeting and then it changed everything. But
I have one quick
Yeah, sure.
question. I'd like to know how we're paying for the playground.
oh, yeah.
That's,
Thank you, Governor Baker. But sorry.
Right.
but-
yes, Kelly has it.
There you go. On the debt,
Yeah.
the subsidy that we get
Mhm.
for,
Right,
from the,
157,
yeah,
right.
was 157,000 this
Right.
year.
Yeah.
That was included in the budget. But we do not have to pay that because that's not something we are billed.
Right.
They deduct the subsidy and then they send us the bill for that debt. So we had included 157,000 in that item,
Okay.
in that line item. So we were able to now pay the 78,000 for the playground.
All right, so I
Okay.
just looked at it, it says cemetery expenses, it doesn't say playground, so I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, that-
processing it as playground.
This is
All
another
right.
practical matter that can take a lot of time. You'll see that chart when you get your warrant. We tried to get it in there a variety of ways. Finally, it had to go in manually because you had to fit some stuff across the page. So there's some abbreviations here that are unavoidable in a chart like this.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So, no, are we all finished then with the
Yeah,
town
just, it
administrator?
says 78. Everybody has the figure of 85,000 in mind for the cost of the playground equipment, which was supposed to be reimbursed by a state grant, which was taken away. Alan
Which we had to
Mayo-
pay upfront and then.
Yeah, Alan Mayo came in and said that they can cover the difference between 78 and 85 through their own budget. And so what you see here is 78,270. That's the remainder of what we have to pay. You know, there might be some chance towards the end of the fiscal year, there's been some speculation that the governor may restore the cut that he made in that grant. Otherwise, we're stuck with it.
And I would also like to point out, I know I've said this before, but just for anyone who's new, that I've seen it said, well, why did you spend money that you didn't have? It's because that's what the requirement of the grant was. We had a timeline that we had to pay the money by a certain date, and then were promised reimbursement, which then was taken away from us. So that's why we paid, just like with the feasibility studies for the school, we are required to pay the full amounts, and then we're reimbursed by MSBA after. So that's why we spend money we don't have, because the
Same
state
with Chapter
requires us.
90.
Chapter 90, yeah, same. Okay, so if we are done with the town administrator report, the next item that we have, agenda item number 2, are the minutes from a previous meeting. We have minutes from Monday, April 6th of this year.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from Monday, April 6, 2015.
Do I have a second?
Second.
First and a second, any discussion from the board? If not, Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. And those are the only ones, right? Next, we have appointments, and I apologize in advance for mispronouncing the last name, but we received a request from the town clerk, Carol Harris, to appoint Stephen Laprise as election constable for the May 4th election. Do I have any comments regarding this appointment?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
First and a second. Is Stephen here or Carol? Do they want to say anything? I know Carol's
No,
not.
he's not
Okay. We have a first and a second. If there's no discussion, Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Yes, sir.
We have this insurance advisory committee group that's been meeting. We're coming to the end of that process, and the insurers, the health insurers, like you to sign a renewal with any changes in early May in order to have a final recommendation from the IAC. We need a representative of the retirees. There were 2 applicants. Do we have those names? There were 2 applicants, and we passed them out, but I mean,
Yeah.
I would urge the board to make an appointment so that we can finish up with the health insurance process.
I will make a motion to appoint Harry Aldrich as the retiree representative for the Insurance Advisory Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
The first and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. The next item we have on the agenda is Steve Castle from the Cable Commission. We have a few topics here to discuss.
I have one, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, we're embarking on the contract renewal with Comcast, and things are gonna start happening pretty fast with that, because the contract has to be renewed, or the contract expires December 22nd. So we're gonna try to end the ascertainment of the town needs phase by June, and doing that, we've been in touch with the cable attorney, I've been talking with him. This first sheet that you have from Community Media Visioning, he works with a consultant that helps towns do a 10-year projection of their operating revenue for a cable station, and if we want to expand the services there and possibly create a studio, a 10-year projection of the capital needs and the current and future needs. So I think Mr. Solomon, the attorney, would hire him anyways, or we can hire him ourselves, and then perhaps, we can regulate how much he can work. And he works at $90 an hour. He has said he doesn't think this would take up more than 10 to 12 hours, but, the more work, I'm gonna end up having to write a lot of these sort of narratives about the 10-year projections and so forth, and do the legwork in town. But the more I can do on it, the less we'll have to pay him and obviously the cable attorney. So I'd like to at least go ahead with that and bring him up. We've made a tentative date to bring him up May 8th and look at this room, which we're getting quotes on to put robotic cameras in, as well as the station and the facilities at the school with the middle school auditorium, which we'd like to possibly do a live feed in, and then we can build off of that. And I'd like to keep it to that for now, because one of my questions with him is, we have a capital plan. What can you give us beyond that? And I'm sure, they know what to present to Comcast and the Comcast attorneys to try to get us a better contract. So that's what this is all about. So, I don't know if you have any input on that, or want to approve or disapprove me going ahead with that, but I would think we should pay the consultant, so there's no misunderstanding with a third party paying the consultant, and then we can better run the consultant and keep their costs in check.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think then you don't run into the, overhead costs that the attorney will tack on. So I think.
Why did this cost so much?
Those attorneys.
You know it works that way.
Yeah, and it's pretty small money to have, an expert give us a better position in the
Absolutely.
negotiations.
Yeah.
The one
Absolutely.
thing on here we've nixed
save
for
money.
now is number 5, the audit of Comcast cable system signal quality for PEG channels, which alone sounds very expensive. And the attorney, Bill Solomon, said he didn't think that's needed right now. That's something we can kind of hold in our back pocket if we feel that we need to nudge Comcast a little bit more and need that. And this consultant was talking about bringing in another consultant, so you can see how this becomes a whole industry in itself very, very quickly. So we're trying to keep tabs on that. The second item I have is the station location in the food pantry building that the light department owns. We have basically an 8x12 closet there that's very cramped, and the roof leaks. There are problems with the building. It's not ideal, certainly. We had an ice dam problem there earlier, I think in February and March, when everyone was having ice dam problems. But we literally had water coming down the walls near electrical outlets, and I unplugged the station and plugged it into a surge strip on the other side of the wall. It's that bad. So if we stay there, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to that building. I know Doug and I had a conversation with the capital planning committee, and you suggested 2 School Street, and the fire chief and I looked at that. And I think, they're using that as a meeting room. I certainly don't want to step on the fire department's toes. And I think that room where the health board used to be is rather small if you want to have, we need a rack of equipment, some sort of an office and video editing stations. And then if you want to have a place for a studio, there's just not enough room there. I think the light department barn would be okay for that, but it needs to be fixed. And I would suggest, especially going into this capital plan that we're putting together, to try to get a better contract out of it and show Comcast the needs that we have, that if we at least go through looking at, talking with the light department, see what they want to do with that building, and then looking at, okay, what would repairs cost? And do we work this into the plan? So I don't know if that makes sense, but I would like to get our new building inspector there and take a look at it.
Yeah, sure.
Steve and I talked, but I haven't talked to him about this. I know that a number of local PEG systems use room in the local schools, because one of the things that may come out of these negotiations is a second channel. It's public, education, and government. We have the government channel. We may very well squeeze another channel from Comcast in the new contract, in which case it would be the education channel. And a lot of communities are able to use, if they are able to locate the system in a school building, they use it for educational purposes. There's lots of students that like this. It becomes an educational opportunity through the school system. Now, we haven't explored that. I haven't even talked to Steve about it. I thought about it after our conversation. That, I don't know if you've talked with anyone over there, but it seems to me that would be an excellent place if they could find space.
We did talk